Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and this is going to be Post-NESARA, those with debts and without debts, but it's part two. If you want to see part one, you got to look for the playlist, and you're going to look for Post-NESARA, and you're going to find the first one in the series. I'm going to do a quick recap, but we're going to go over that. So please do me a favor, like and subscribe. And you're going to have to forgive me too, guys. I'm fighting getting sick here, and I'm on some I'm on some Ivor, let's put it that way, and just trying to get better. But it's pretty important to get this out here, so I wanted to kind of push through with that too. Okay, so those with debt and those without debt. Okay, so we're thinking. I want you to think after NESARA comes in. Okay, and I know it's easy not to see it, but the reality is that it is coming. Okay, so again, we talked a little bit about the problem, which is the percentages of the household income to distribution is just so far out of whack with that too. I mean, the median income, overall has gone up, risen dramatically, and then is starting to fall back again. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing because in median income going up, prices are also going up pretty dramatically. Now, it did wonderfully during Trump's time frame when prices were a lot lower, and that made a big difference with that too. But personal savings are starting to tail off so dramatically that people don't have the money anymore as holding, fixing some situations in areas that are almost historic lows with that too. And the debts are out of whack all the way through and through. Okay, so we're going to kind of skip over some of those areas that we talked about last time. All right, so let's move in. And we talked about the Fed debts. They are out of line and have no ability to keep going in this kind of process. Okay, now let's move on to part two. Okay, so I just wanted to just do a quick one. You want to have more information about it, we got to do part one. Okay, now let's do part two. Let me show you a couple of interesting things. This is percentage of savings per generation. Now, when we talk about the Z generation, the under $1,000 in savings, and it's talking about all savings like emergency funds, even non-workplace retirement accounts, investments. Look at this massive amount of people have less than $1,000. A third of almost everyone, even through the X, the Y, and the Z generations, are absolutely in an ugly position. But here's the scary part: baby boomers who now, listen, if you believe some parts of data, it's 62 to 45. And I was born in 66. Now, other ones will go 45 to 65. And I'm like that tweener generation. And frankly, I'm much more like a baby boomer. So I'm just telling you directly, that's how I think of myself. My wife is a baby boomer. We have baby boomer mentality overall with that too. So you're talking about someone 58, 59, close enough to retirement age, right? And to people who are all the way pretty deeply into retirement. And 20% of them have almost nothing to the name, even adding in 30% if you go up to to $5,000. So what we're talking about is a very significant portion. So that's almost 45% have less than $25,000 in their accounts. 45% of Americans. Now, if we're talking about, the Z generation, 50, 60, 70% have less than $25,000 to them. So they are really, really struggling with this kind of thing. Now, that's not super uncommon with the Z generation overall, but it does mean that they're very susceptible to this. And I've watched this kind of thing. And my son is a Z generation, but he actually has way more savings than you can possibly imagine. I mean, he's been really working it hard to try to keep savings. He's a lot about that kind of thing. Now, when we start moving up into the hundreds, it's only 8%. Moves up to about in the I mean no top generations, or sorry, the youngest ones have less than about 5-ish 7-8% of anything over over $100,000. But when we talk about people who are the X, which are, 55, 58, 56 kind of thing and beyond, they're still only sitting at not even 20% of the people have $100,000. They're not at retirement ability. And it's even scarier to realize those who are standing on the edge of retirement are sitting at, what is that, 35% are sitting with $100,000. And that's just not retirement amount. And you might go, that's just a bunch. It is not if you're trying to see this. So a huge portion of a lot of America is not able to retire. And if they do retire, they're sucking heavily on Social Security, which is really an underfit point. Okay. One of the things that those who don't have debt you'll find about them, and we're going to explain why this is the case, is that they're very goal-driven people, which means that they have a budget. They know what they want to work from. And this is something that I've been working to instill in my own son too, is that kind of response. And actually, every single kid that I would talk to, I would bug them about this. One of those things is making sure that you know what you're spending. Now, when people ask me all the time, should I do, and I go, well, listen, I don't know what your budget is. I don't know what your area is like. Even if I knew all of those factors, why would you ask someone outside of God who actually knows every factor in the history of the world, right? So you do need to have a budget, and it needs to be in line with situations, because the debt forgiveness is only going to be one time. So people who live as if they're without debt. Now, I want you to think about that for half a second. I'm going to just pull this off the screen for just a minute here, but I want you to think about this for a second. If you are awakened and know about this NESARA thing, and you're saying to yourself, get a drink of water. Oh, if you're saying to yourself, okay, what is it going to feel like? Well, guess what? You have to first think like you're in that position in life, okay? I mean, if you wanted to be a business owner, right? Or you wanted to do auto mechanic and you really don't have the training, but this has really been your dream. If you want to be an amazing chef, if you don't visualize yourself into that position, you'll never be in that position. And I promise you, that is a absolute classic statement. See, people wish to be in there, but they never visualize themselves into that. And so that means that they don't have the goal or the budget with that too. Oops. Secondarily, they need to make shrewd decisions, which means that they are not falling for market manipulations. One of the biggest market manipulations that's actually happening in the Patriot movement are these people who see my face, see Mark Z's face, see Michelle Moore's face. They see a whole bunch of different people. And they see these truthers on there, and they're seeing them talk about, QFS crypto. And yet it's not one of us on the screen saying that. If you actually interview people who have had that conversation, it's some guy with an Indian accent. And you're going, well, I can actually listen to Scott and know what his voice sounds like. Other than, like right now, which my voice sounds really gross because I'm still kind of sick, but you get the idea. You don't fall for that kind of stuff. And so that's really an important point to kind of hit right now is don't fall for those manipulations. Don't jump at a circumstance that is tickling your fancy right now. Pull that down and put it on a list and say, and wait even a day and then kind of go, you know what? Do I really need that? And see where it falls within the list. Now, God might keep bringing that up because it is something and it's time to deal with that issue. But it's only when He keeps bringing it back up to the forefront. Being disciplined is to like look at your budget and then stay within those things. But you do modify your budget depending upon your circumstance. Now, one of my employees has been driving an old car. She got out of college, working for me now. And the only way that she replaced the car that she has right now is because it took 5 times just to get the dumb thing started. And air conditioning's out. There's a whole bunch of things going wrong. I mean, that thing is pretty much done. And I mean, it had, tons and tons of miles on it. And it's a good time to kind of look at that. Now, it's not because it's a great time to buy a car. It's because she had no other choices in that way. And so what happens is that she modified her needs based upon looking at her budget with that. You also need to watch for the materialism that advertising and pushes make upon you. And so many people, and trust me, I fight this one in my own self. I think about things I want. I mean, I really, really want. And that is a big problem. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I really like high-tech cars. It's just my thing. And yet, I have to like push that away all the time. And it is a big old nasty fight. Know what your temptations are. Be patient. Putting off purchases until they're affordable because you have the savings makes a massive difference in your life. Now, there are times where you do have to spend for something because it jumps up to the needs basis with that too. And so you might have savings, but what happens is that it's now time to start utilizing that savings because of XYZ. So we're back into our goal driven and our budget points. And lastly, we don't understand value whatsoever. Okay? So let me grab something. So this is an iPad, okay? I use this iPad in every way, shape, and form. All the time I'm using an iPad. And I will say to you that you look at iPads and you look at things like that, and you'll say, well, there's a new version coming out. And by the way, I just heard, in June or something like that, there's a new iPad version. And always in September, there's an iPhone or something like that. And when you look at the value of what you're going to accomplish with that, it doesn't really add up. Whereas many years later, when that thing can't accomplish the goals, then that's something to look at. Now, you would also ask the question, how much do I need it? Is it just something I screw around with while I wait in a waiting room? Well, let's find something better than that. You can find something cheap that you can kind of live through or stick with what you got. So again, we don't understand value, and we are really not going to understand values in the NESARA timeframe because all those values are going to adjust, and you need to have that on the top of your mind. Now, here's what I want you to see. Again, I'm seeing you who are sitting there and going, I'm in debt, right? And I go, okay. You need to see forward in the future, not today, that you're out of debt. Okay? So we're going to compare the person who's newly out of debt versus the person who's already been out of debt. So those released from debt, it creates a happiness. Sometimes it creates a confusion. Now, what would that mean? Let me give you a funny example. I think it was in 2021 where I first started to really watch some people who were falling out of debt. And no, in August of 2020, the QFS purportedly did turn on, but it doesn't mean that the SWIFT systems were there. So we had the possibility to be on the QFS from that point in time, which meaning be in NESARA, having all the good things happening, right? And some people were like, but you were expecting it back then. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also expecting Jesus to return at any moment in time. I'm also expecting this thing to be over at any time. That doesn't have anything to do with me being wrong all the time. I'm just in that place of expectation. I'm always looking forward with that too. But I protect my expectation by my faith. My faith is going, I know this is going to happen, and I'm not going to be deterred because of my expectations. So, the very first time I ever actually experienced a funniest story in the world, and some of you might have heard me say say it, is a wife who comes into one of my meetings. And I used to do these little meetings in my what I call truth room. It's like 30 people sit in there. She's telling the story, and her husband had just bought a Toyota. I don't know what it was, and then he finds out that the payments paid off. And she's telling the story. He's screaming bloody murder at the bank. Well, what the heck are you doing? She's like, ma'am, excuse me, sir, I don't know what's happening. Your loan's gone. It's paid off. I don't know. You're not taking my truck or Toyota. And this just went on. And she had the whole room in stitches because she's a good storyteller with that too. And the point is that is probable for a lot of people who really don't understand the debt forgiveness. Even Elon Musk came out yesterday, something like that. This is early May, and he said the dollar is dying. Well, that's actually a good thing. But if you're listening to it from the outside, you're like, holy cow, what are we going to do? Calm down, guys. This is a good thing. But it will cause happiness as well. You'll also, there's a question of how do they handle the paperwork without understanding what has happened? So, for instance, you're going to say, okay, my debt happened. My debt was released in essence, right? And then you're going to say, well, what's happening? Guys, calm down a little bit. It is going to take a little bit of time for the banks and the credit agencies to like release your title to you of that car, for instance, okay? It's going to take a little time for that to flush out in the wash. Don't be screaming at people because they haven't done it yet, okay? And that is going to happen. And just yesterday, my wife and I were trying to sell, my father-in-law's house who passed away. And, it was a title that was really, he was out of debt. It had a title in a really strange way with a mobile home and a very just strange circumstances. And we're like working with the tag agency and working with the government agencies, and everyone's confused about how to release it out of the trust into to the new owners that we were selling this thing to. And it's going to be confusing at first. And it's even confusing now because the agencies have all these weird regulations. And when we start ripping away some of that regulations, you're going to start seeing it be easier to happen. But it's going to take a little time. And by the way, you've got hundreds of millions of people that are in line for this, okay? They've never been on a budget, these people who have had their debt released. It's a big problem. So you can't turn around and have that crazy lottery winning kind of thing. And again, these people don't have any savings. So what do they do now that they're out of it? Now, some people will say on one side is that, oh, you're going to have a UBI, and you're going to have millions and millions of dollars from your KCB trust. And I go, oh, that's called lottery winning idea. Frankly, even if you had $1 million, you'll spend it in just about a year or two. I mean, do you understand? Even the people who are talking about magic fairy dust of UBI and or monthly amounts or a huge amount of money, the reality is people will spend it. You need to change your mentality. And frankly, if you had that kind of stuff, what would happen is you'd never go to work. Don't tell me you wouldn't go to work. I mean, sorry, don't tell me you'd go to work because you wouldn't. Most people they act like they were going to go to work, but they'd be so unmotivated at the job. And then they would kind of go, you mean I have to take out the trash? I mean, I've taken out the trash as a professional many times, but they would look at that and go, no, I don't want to, I just don't want to do this. I mean, and there's always irritating things about any job in the world. But because what would happen is that they have this other possibility, they'll finally quit. And that is a horrible thing for an economy that basically a huge portion of people just don't have to work anymore. It can't happen. So we've got to get people starting to understand what it means and to get back onto a budget. They need a plan for savings. The plan is a real simple one. Is start saving 10% of your budget of the money that's coming in. Now you might say, I cannot do this because I'm at my limit every time. I understand, but have a plan for that. Because that is 5 seconds afterward, whether your salary doesn't change and you don't have the IRS and you have the debt relief and you have some of that stuff, do not run out and start buying things. If you had $2,000 a month, whatever that might be, start putting aside that $200 and shoving it in savings. The more that you can put away, the better that you're in that situation. And again, looking at new debts. Now, let's say you do need a new house. I got it. I get you totally. Credit is going to have no meaning because what the credit scores are from, next to nothing to, 500 credit, which is still in an area that no one really will give you anything. 650 credit, 630 credit is kind of the bottom for really moving forward with something, and up to 830 credit. Well, those things are all built upon debt to income. And so when your debt to income there is no debt, how do they actually work it? So people who are fully out of debt, those people, frankly, they don't have really great credit scores at times because they just don't use debt. And so some people have talked to me, I've seen it many, many, many times. I've actually run credit reports and see how they basically have really cruddy credit, but because they don't use any credit, it makes it very difficult for those agencies to see them. So the score systems are not going to matter. Now, we're going to see a budget-based system that banks and other real loan agencies are going to pull away some of the horrible systems of the compound interest because they're not going to be allowed to. But they have to have a simple interest kind of way because you can't give away debt and them not getting anything back for it. I mean, that's just like if I'm a business and I give you all of the product without you paying for it, and you go, well, I'll give you $10 a month. And I'm like, what do you think that's actually, it costs me, multiples of times to be able to do that. That becomes, I become like this interest-free bank. I mean, I don't have the money to do that. And no business really can do that. So there are processes called the Rule of 78, which is a process of a shorter type of loan. It can be, but it doesn't have to be exactly a shorter type of loan. And what they do is they front load the interest. Now we're talking simple interest, so it's a way smaller amount of interest. I mean, tiny. And you have to pay those loan parts out, let's just say 6 months, a year, whatever time frame for that. And you're just paying the interest. By the time that interest is done, then you're in your principal, and you're paying only principal from that point on. But the bank then has been paid back. So they're going, wow, man, at least we got our interest out of it. Now we can still go and attach that, and get that thing back if you don't want to pay your debts. Well, that would be another thing. But again, they would be doing it very legally with that too. Now, debt is not a vehicle to get ahead in life and savings. But I mean, life, but savings is going to be your vehicle to move ahead. You see, I just saw a video about this, but it's been out for a while here. Robert Kiyosaki talks a little bit about this, that he leverages debt to move ahead, leverages debt to create assets. Well, that's actually not going to work anymore. He's going to flip into, I'm going to use and get assets and slowly move them up. And the more assets I have, the more capability that I can do in a business kind of thing. So that's going to change that whole process. But those who've lived without debt, they might have a slight bit of debt. For instance, let's say you pay off your credit cards every month. Especially I do that on a business level. And if it hits in the middle of the month, I mean, you might get a really kind of cool boop. There it is. It's all gone. And so it doesn't matter what the debts are. It doesn't matter how high they are. It is going to be just wiped out. You're going to say, well, that's not fair. Stop with the fair thing. Because if you calculate fair all the way out, there is no possible way to make everything fair. And you know this. You know this in your heart of heart. There's no way to make things fair. These people already have savings to backstop, and they understand it. They have a budget, and they're patient with their purchase. If they wish to build a house upgrade, again, the rule of 78 will kind of come forward for them. And money will finally be seen as a value instead of a nothing. So savings is actually going to be a really powerful thing that we're going to want to be able to leverage. And the banks are going to desire your savings there. So they're going to give you really attractive interest rates on that kind of thing because it's valuable, and then they can get ahead by having that as well. And there's going to be a lot of interesting banking changes related to that. So that kind of thing, those people, let me go backward one step here. Oops, sorry. These people who live without debt, and many of you are listening to my channel right now, you are the teachers of the people who are in debt. Have God prepare you to be that teacher, to teach people how to do this. Maybe you're going to have a Bible study or something or other to get into that mode, but that is something you want to be able to do. Now, the bank's relationship with the customer in a fiat currency means the banks control the cards, credit cards and the playing cards in essence, okay? They control everything. They write long-term contracts beholding you to their terms. They make you live within their game, and they screw you every time they can. And they love to get you re-upped into it, like refining your loan. They create massive institutions that increase the corruptions. And if you look at the SEC's actual website, the very first paragraph in there, they will talk about how banks are like the best people in the history of the world, in essence. That's the Scott version of that point. But I'm going, you have got to be kidding me. I can show you 100 examples almost off the top of my head of banks doing, absolutely sick things. Okay? And 2008 is one of the best, easiest examples that we can find. They decrease your education with a need for wealth advisors. So what they do, now wealth advisors are not a bad thing, but you need to not just have that person go, okay, go do it yourself. No, teach me what I need to know. But see, they don't want to do that. They go, no, just go away. I'll take care of it for you. That's not the way you need to do it. And they create so much confusion in how you manage your money. But in a new asset-backed economy, banks will become agents with less control. Instead of holding all the cards, they're going to be the agent that will be able to, they're working for you. And you have to know that. That will have to be transparent and then compete on the local levels. One of the things I hate about big banks is they come in and they rip apart the small banks. They rip apart the small businesses. You see, if you wanted to take over, let's say you are from, Baltimore. I'm just making up something, right? And you have a pretty thriving business, but you want to move into Charlotte, or you want to move into a maybe even a small, functionary town just past Charlotte to the west of it. And you found a place that's a great place for us to expand upon or expand within, right? And so what happens is that people leverage all these big banks to be able to like dominate a market. And if what's going to happen is this transparency is going to show up through the QFS, and then you're going to have to create relationships in that local town in North Carolina. And you don't want to do it, that's fine. But you're not going to really be able to expand there because they're going to have the people who love that community are going to live in that community, are going to be about that community. And that's going to be a really powerful point to small businesses, mid-sized businesses. The SEC, which probably won't be called that, they'll have, these institutions are going to knock the other ones for a loop. They are going to spank them in every way, shape, and form. And so they're going to really criminalize activities. People are going to be scared to mess with them. Now, we're going to walk with a lack of trust with these relationships. And so what happens is that we have to see it as a relationship, a little bit of distrust, because they're going to have to deal with it. Man, if you've created this empire, guess what? You're going to be having sweep the legs kind of conversations every day. And again, we need massive need of education. I believe that's part of one of my roles in life. So when you have a low monetary value, increases of price, there's an increasing price until the consumer cannot afford it. And then there becomes artificial price restrictions. And we actually see that in a lot of ways. And then they try to tamp down on the prices to artificially kind of make it better for that person to do it. And then it leads into that increasing the price until there's no internal value, like health insurances. Actually, all insurances. What happens with this is that what companies will do is that there's a small town, and this happened in my own industry of audiology actually through the 90s and early 2000s. What happened is there were, at the time, there were about 40 different hearing aid manufacturers. It's really down to the big five and a couple other little tiny things, okay? And what happens is that, and they did this even on the local levels too. So a guy would, the people were priced at a certain price, but a big consumer would come in and undercut the pricing, and then bring in all the consumers into their place, and then wipe out their all their competition, hire their competition half the time, and then slowly raise that price until no one had an internal value, knew what it could be like. This is the same thing happens in industries like health insurance. And then the manipulated values of houses are out of line. I mean, there's a house, and I mean, houses in areas that I live in have risen 2/3 higher in 7 years. Now, just think about that net number: 66% higher in about 2/3 of a time. I mean, in 7 years. That's so far out of bounds. It's not even funny. It's just crazy. Those things have to kind of come down because, but it just how it works in the low monetary value system. And so once costs of goods sold, things that have a value. So for instance, you can't just buy a pen, but there is costs that are associated inside of that pen, right? And so once the pen's value raises in price, then you have to raise the price overall. So the cost raises the value. Now, when we flip over into a high monetary value, what occurs is that you start seeing a decreasing of the price, because what it will do is create more competition, because transparency starts showing up and it increases the value of the currency, which is then going to do some really interesting things. With that decreasing of the price, because there hasn't been any internal value, you'll see a decrease in price, not just because they're manipulating, but because of what the market will bear. Now, if you have a house that has a bunch of value, like everyone loves this house, it might not lower in value at all, but that is actually exactly what happens in a market where what the market will bear. That's kind of how we look at that thing. But it takes time for the soft costs to go through before, oops, I just did that wrong here. Sorry, let me back up here. It takes time for the soft costs to go down before you get to the ones that have cost of goods sold in that, before you see that change. So let me pull over here and pull this off the screen. So what I want you to understand is that this thing is going to is not just moderately, it's going to massively change. So you need to kind of understand what's going on around you. You need to be saying, okay, be calm, because they're not exactly going to be the way that I think it will work. You have to change your mentality and start to expect some cool things that can show up in your life. Okay? Hope it helps you out. You can kind of look at Dr. Scott Young to see what's up there. You can also look and see the social media sites as well. Thanks so much.